l'océan, ensemble, together. Ooh, yeah. Step 4, l'océan, ensemble, together. Step 4, l'océan, ensemble, together. Ooh, yeah. Step 4, l'océan, ensemble, together. Step 4, l'océan, ensemble, together.
We're going to sort out some of our technical issues. And here we are, and I will trust that means, Dane, that we are live on DBS Radio, the nation station, coming to you live from Maho, Dominica today. So I hope that there's not going to be any trucks running by the Campbell Road here, a little too loud, playing bouillon music or horns or anything, because I'm not in the nice contained confines of the DBS studio. But you're listening to the Ansanm Podcast. We are the voice of the Ansanm movement. That is ANSANM. It's a Creole word. It means together, because that's what we're trying to do with the Ansanm platform at ansanm.org, ansanm.org. Encourage you to go down there. Onto the website. We're creating what we call the infrastructure of connection that we believe that the world, this region, needs today. And more specifically, during this first pre-launch phase, we're focusing on digital professionals throughout the Caribbean and in the diaspora and around the world, all of our friends and allies who are going to help us to help this region and the MSMEs, the small and medium businesses in the region, and the service providers and the professionals throughout the region do a lot better digitally. There are hundreds of billions of dollars of North American outsourcing opportunities that we can access together if we work together. Go to ansanm.org today. I want to thank our sponsors and supporters. I want to thank the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, the CTU, the Caribbean Export Development Agency, the Inter-American Development Bank, IDB, who's funded this, our partners at Cloud Carib, at UE, and of course the DX Alliance, our friends from the DX Alliance, of which our guest today, David Matherin, is one of those who has been showing up for each and every one of us for the last few years. I'm so blessed to have him here talking about what we're doing at Ansanm today. We're going to learn a little bit more about David. But first, full disclosure, I've known David for quite a while, much longer than the few years that he's worked with us at the DX Alliance. But David, it's a pleasure to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure being here tonight.
Yeah. And in the studio audience, I mean, by the way, if you want to be part of this virtual studio audience, we're not doing call-ins. We're on a Zoom call. So if you ever wanted to join the Zoom call, in the future, you'll be able to go to the Ansanm website and check that out at the podcast page. For now, you can go to DennisAugustine.com/podcast and you can register there. There's going to be a link there where you can join the virtual studio audience. I see a full house of some people, many of which seem to have names, David, that seem like they're related to you. I see some Austries, and I see another fellow St. Lucian and everything else. But before we get into where you're from, I met you so many years ago when I was in Toronto. And I was trying to lose some weight and learn to play ball a little. I was one of these people. I played a little bit of basketball in college, only because I was, a 6-foot black guy at the seminary, and they figured I should be able to play, and I couldn't, but I hustled and I played a little bit. And then I got to live in Toronto, and I really wanted to get better, and I started going to some community centers, and across the road from the Trinity Bellwoods Community Center, there was a place called the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, where I met David. He wasn't a patient. There was a gym there where somebody told me there was a run, and I went to the run, and I found a whole bunch of my age-ish, just slightly older, but around my age, Caribbean guys playing ball. I think I was almost 25 years ago, David.
Yep, a long time. And it came back. It went so fast, Dennis. So fast.
It's like a blink. It's like a blink. I remember we were playing there, and our buddy Harold, maybe he's listening in, was bringing in his little freshly baked baby, Kiera. We used to watch her in the stands, and now she's off in university and doing great. And my gosh, and you yourself, you had some younglings around that time as well, and now you have other younglings. What's going on in your life?
Just one youngling, and now one grandson. So that's that's pretty awesome. Yeah. So I'm a grandfather. I never thought I'd see the day, but I am.
And I will never stop teasing you, because I won't be a grandfather probably. We're not planning on having any, Galia and I. So I'll just tease you like you're an old man for being a
That's
grandfather.
Okay. That's okay. I can take it.
How the knees holding up, man? We have a comment from the studio audience. Some lady says he's a handsome grandpa. I'm going to have to tell your wife.
Right, she is.
Have to tell your wife all about that. That happens to be.
Yeah.
How the knees holding up, old man?
The knees are okay. I'm still icing them down after every game. Still wearing my protectors, so they're holding up okay. It's just a matter of getting old, man. You get injured, it takes you forever to get healed. The knees, they're here 1 week. They're not another week, so whatever.
I
live with it. Yeah, exactly. It's a price you pay for having a good time, and just to hang out with the boys. I'll gladly pay that every week.
There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. 25 years, and they've just been a wonderful, really stable part of our lives. I never want to miss. When I was I never want to miss, the
Run, right?
Saturdays that we spend
Exactly.
together. Yeah, for
Exactly.
sure. The runs are so much. And David as well. I mean, you like me. You're a Canadian, a proud Canadian, a son of Toronto as well. We're going to touch on the Raptors a little bit later on. I want to get your hot take on a few things, but we'll do that near the end of the show after we're done with the business. I want to get your hot take on another return home journey. I put that in air quotes for Mr. Kawhi Leonard, who supposedly is coming back home to Toronto, and see what you
Right.
think about how that's going to turn out. But tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, I met you in Canada, in Toronto,
Mhm.
but you weren't born in Toronto. Where were you
I
born,
was
and how did you end up in Canada and in Toronto?
I was born in Saint Lucia, in the Caribbean. Um, and I left St. Lucia at 1979. I was 13 years old when I came to Canada. Um, as you can imagine, you know, being from a warm island and, immigrating to Canada, the contrast was absolute.
Bit of a
Um,
shock.
Bit of a shock, yeah, you could
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
I left a place where, my family name carried some weight. My dad was a prominent public servant,
Mhm.
and I landed in a massive metropolis. And, I had to learn the social currency of the new culture from absolute zero, right? So
Right.
it's a bit of a learning curve, a lot of adjustment, but you make do what you can, right? So,
How I wonder, I can imagine that's quite the adjustment for you. I actually kind of have almost the reverse around the same time and then back. I
mm,
was born in Dominica. We moved to Canada in 74 when I was 5 years old. I'm just a little bit behind you. And then went back to Dominica when I was around 13 years old.
mhm.
So I also had this little bit of I should say, culture shock as well, the other
Yeah.
way. Even though I had this romantic attachment to Dominica, but for you, what was it like for you growing up in Toronto, in Canada? Did you feel like you belonged there? What's your kind of a do you?
It,
And by
it,
the
it
way,
took a second.
Happy Canada Day. I think I got to
Oh,
say
yes.
that too. Belated. That
Very
was
good.
yesterday, right?
Right.
So happy belated Canada Day. But
Right.
do you feel Canadian? How do you
I,
feel
I
this?
I do feel Canadian. I mean, I've been here for over 40 years. So, like I always say, my mind is Canadian, my heart is St. Lucian.
Right.
My formative years in a way are Canadian, but everything about my upbringing was St. Lucian. Um, and Yes, it was a bit of a transition. It was a bit of a learning curve, but I was 13 years old, right? I was just starting, my teenage years. So you adjust quickly at that age. I wasn't an adult coming into Canada, and when where you can really feel that learning curve. I was just a kid growing up, so the adjustment was there in the beginning for the first couple of years, but then you jump right in, right? So
Right, right. And you went to school pretty much in the suburbs. I mean, where did you went to school? I was Applewood, was it in the
that's
Mississauga
right. I
kind of
went,
area?
yeah, when I first landed in Canada, I lived in an area of Toronto called Parkdale. I
Parkdale.
went to Parkdale Public School, and then we moved to Mississauga, and then I did my high school in Mississauga in Applewood, Applewood Heights.
Applewood Ice.
So
And shout
yeah,
out to the Parkdale posse because that's pretty much
yes,
the guys we play basketball with, as many of the
correct.
Parkdale guys back from the
Mhm.
day. Um, and Applewood, but Applewood was a very oh my gosh, I see a thumbs up from the man.
From
Ian
Ian,
Gittins is
oh yeah,
part of the
it's part of the
posse
crew, man.
himself,
Yep.
part of the crew is there. And you guys can put up your hand or make a note in the chat if you have any comments over in the live studio audience and you want to make a comment. We'll consider it, especially if it's cruel towards David and my
Yeah.
brother. No. Uh, but David, Applewood is a very, I mean, it's kind of middle class white school at the
It,
time,
it
right?
it
When was this?
certainly
When did you
was.
go
Oh
there? It
yes,
was what
absolutely.
year
It
was
was
that you were in?
Okay, do we
Applewood.
have to date ourselves now?
Yes, yes,
Let's
we
just
do.
say it was the early 80s, all right?
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Let's just say it was the early 80s. And yes, indeed, it was an absolutely very, um, what's a nice way to put this? Very Caucasian school.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
total. I
So,
mean, it's a very
yeah.
preppy,
And
it's a
but
preppy
there was a
school.
exactly, but there was a
Uh,
niche group of us, right? There's a niche group of, there's, some black guys and girls going there, and there's some other cultures that went to Applewood too, as the Filipino culture. So we all kind of hang out together. We all gravitated towards each other because, that's what minorities do, right? In certain
right.
situations. So at school, yeah, for sure.
And I would guess that, obviously finding other Black, brown, and Caribbean people, especially, was going to be help you make that adjustment.
Oh, and they were easy to find. You're in a school of a bunch of Caucasian. You see a black guy, it's like, okay, there you are.
There we are. That's
there
that's
you are.
the
It's
that's
not
my
that.
lunch
It's not
table.
exactly it. It's not that hard, right?
Where am I going
And
to sit down? Come over here.
and
Get
of
along.
course, the
Yeah,
other things that kind of brings you together is the whole culture, right? So the whole hip
sure.
hop music,
Yeah.
break dancing, DJing, everything that we have in common as a minority kind of brings us
And I
together too.
bet I bet it didn't hurt that you're a light-skinned, green-eyed DJ. At this
Ah.
time it probably was helpful, wasn't it, David? Let's be honest. This is the '80s after all. Your kind was
Dennis, I'm gonna
rather
tell you
hot.
the truth. I only realized I was light skinned and green eyes when I came to Canada. In St. Lucia, I'm just another guy. I'm
There you go.
just I'm just another dude walking the streets, right? So yeah, you only
Yeah,
feel that difference when you're in a place where, hey, not everybody's like you, man.
yeah. I mean, I
And
gotta
they
tell you.
pointed out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, maybe I'll say, when I spent time from I was 5 years old to 13, and then back again for high school. So I went to Port Credit
Mhm.
secondary. So it was, again, predominantly white middle class in Mississauga high school. But when I went to primary school at Percy W. Mary in Oakville, I was one of, the very few Black people. I think my sister and I were the only two at the school at the time, and there hadn't been any other Black folks for ages. So I think I learned very quickly, especially like you mentioned, being young, how to adapt to that kind of a situation. Uh,
Yeah.
but tell me, did you feel that you had any? Let me just put it very plainly. Is
Mhm.
is Canada, and maybe even Canada in the '80s, David, was Canada? Did you feel that there was a racist prejudice there? What's
Ah,
Canada like
I
in the '80s for you? What's your journey
I
been
am
like?
blessed. Dennis, I'm blessed.
Yeah.
And I'll put it as bluntly as I can myself too. I'm a light-skinned dude growing up in Canada. I'm like you know, I can jump literally in both camps, right? I can
Right.
be in the black camp and be in the white camp.
Yeah.
So I didn't really feel racism. And
Yeah.
and I know that a lot of my friends most definitely did because
Yeah.
we spoke about it. And
Right.
in a lot of ways, I was kind of almost like the bridge between them and other folk. But yeah, I didn't really feel that much of it.
Mhm. I'll also
So
say there's something about your attitude too. I mean, because you're even in our friend circle, you're very
mm,
much the connector. You and Harold end up to be very much connectors with all kinds of people, right? I mean, you're always, the ones, they're the glue between everybody. So I
yeah.
can see that helps from the bridge building part.
Hmm.
Uh, but I also remember speaking to some of our friends like Robbie and those guys who were
Yeah.
from Jamaica, who grew up at the same time, with that Jamaican accent, right? And
Right, exactly.
being darker and
And the
having
stuff that
even
they
stronger
went through, yep,
was very different.
very different from me. Very, very
Yeah.
different from me. And it's sad in a way because, because I don't see myself as really so much so a mixed guy.
Mhm.
I almost in a way feel a little guilty for not
do you,
shit.
do you
No,
do you
seriously, for
have
not.
white guilt, David? Do you have as a Black Saint Lucian who has white guilt? Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
dog, I wouldn't go that far. I'll just say that, you know what? There are some experiences that my friends had that, I felt guilty because I never felt those experiences. I've never experienced those. So yeah, there's some guilt there.
Right. And Jerry's in the studio audience as well. He said, that, well, you didn't notice about the green-eyed thing, Like Jerry says, no, you're lying. You definitely were a bandit. Yeah. And
Uh,
I've heard similar stories, but since
Jerry
David's
better
wife is in
pipe
the
down,
studio
man.
audience, we're not going to talk about of his conquests. All right, so
Jerry better pipe down. He has nothing better to say. Can't we
Jerry,
can't we mute that guy?
no, Jerry, what are you saying here, Jerry?
Censorship
You
doesn't
want to
exist.
out him?
No, I've
What's
known
that?
Earl for a long time. Earl's a good guy, but he does have some stories. But this is not the forum to talk about it.
Thank
We'll do
you.
that Saturday after basketball. Okay.
That's right. And by the
Yeah,
way, it's David Earl Matherman. Is that your middle name, or is it
that's
just
correct. Yeah.
okay? Very good. Because I always get suspicious when I know somebody for years by one name, and then I run
Yeah.
into a whole bunch of other people who know them by a
Yeah.
completely other name, and I wonder what's
Like
going on.
this guy's wanted by the FBI.
You know what I
He's
mean?
wanted in several states. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but getting back to, I mean, that that kind of tension between your identities. How do you identify? Do you identify as a
Oh, I
Caribbean person, as a
definitely
Canadian
identify.
person? As
Here's the beautiful thing about Canada. Canada allows you to retain your culture and your identity and whatnot from where you came from. And that's
sure,
the beautiful thing about being Canadian, right? You can bring all of that into Canada. As long as you contribute in a positive way to the Canadian society, they allow you that freedom, right? So that's a good thing. So do I identify? I identify as both. I'm a St. Lucian and a Canadian.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
And how, I
you
mean,
know,
aside from being 13, was that also reinforced by your parents along the way very much, those St. Lucian ties? Did you visit often? Did they kind
oh
of
yeah. Well,
relate
I do
those?
try I do try to go back yearly because like
Mhm.
I told you before, my mind is Canadian, but my heart is St. Lucian. And there's a certain kind of for lack of a better word, there's a certain kind of security you receive when you can get off the plane in your home country and you
Mhm.
feel all the weight of the world just shed off your shoulders.
Wow. Yeah.
When you smell that ocean air, when you're getting off the plane and you're talking to everybody you've known from childhood, there's a
Yeah.
certain, yeah, there's a certain peace that comes with that feeling, with that, that feeling. So yeah, I try to go back every year, try to reconnect with my people. And yes, and just almost recharge, right? And to come
Right.
back
Right.
to the hustle and bustle of this metropolis.
Right.
Yeah,
I've got to say, I felt that. I felt that back to Dominica as well. And I tried to unpack that a little bit. I even felt it in Barbados when
Mhm.
Galia and I moved there some years ago to found the DX Alliance. The creators of Ansanm, the organization that created Ansanm, DX Alliance. When I arrived in Barbados, I did feel a little bit of this lightness, and I wonder if for you it might be some of the same things that it was for me, in that I just saw a lot of people that a lot more people that kind of looked like me, and
exactly.
I was not as conscious of being,
Exactly.
you know, didn't have to put on, yeah, didn't have to, you don't have to code switch, you don't have to do anything, you're just,
Yep. Yep.
yeah,
You are who you are, right? When you're back there, there's everybody you see is like you, but the people that are in charge are like you. The police people are like you. The politicians are like you.
right,
So that it's so liberating when you are in a place that's you.
right.
So yeah,
It
exactly.
is, it is liberating, but I also got to say, David, that after almost like over 4 years here, it's also there's that romantic kind of nostalgia for the Caribbean, and then that lightness that you feel when everybody looks like you. But then And then some of the
Then
realities
you
of,
hit the crux of it, right? Because when I go back to St. Lucia, I'm there for like a week or 2 weeks or
you know what
three
I mean?
weeks.
You're
Yeah,
visiting. You're
exactly. So you can
in and
you can
out.
have all those feelings and leave, right? Where you don't have to deal with the reality of the situation that everybody that lives in St. Lucia deals with, right? On a daily.
Well, that's absolutely it. I mean,
Yeah.
when I moved to when we my wife and I moved to Barbados, I was still with my previous company, and you know, as well as founding the DX Alliance. But the partners there, and some of the folks there had this misconception that, you know, you're going to the Caribbean, you're living there, so they imagine this resort life, that your life
Right.
is beaches and coconut rum punches all the time. I think, um, and then, but you know, fail to realize that sometimes, and I hope it doesn't happen while I'm streaming live from Maho. Sometimes the power goes out for hours on end, or the
Right. Yeah.
internet, or
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
water, and
Yeah.
but
And
visiting, you can certainly enjoy
visiting is
that.
great. Visiting is great
Yeah,
because sometimes you have such a tight schedule that it kind of forces you to do everything that you have to do.
yeah,
So you don't piss anybody off because you're visiting everybody and it's a very tight schedule. You go visit this person, that person, this person, and you're out.
yeah.
It's all
Right.
good, right?
And
So,
every and most of the people, I would say almost all of them, and
mhm.
you're a personable guy with lots of family. I should lots of family. David's father
Oh,
was
lots
also
of
very
family.
busy in St. Lucia. Charo,
Oh,
the
let's
apple
not
doesn't
bring that
fall.
out.
No, no, no. Let's not bring that. Let's not bring that up.
Uh,
Lots of family in St. Lucia. I mean, so they're going to be happy to see you. But
of
speaking of
course.
family, man, uh, and I tease you about it, but again, congratulations. I think it's a wonderful thing that you're now a grandfather, and you did a wonderful job with your daughter, and now you get this chance to be a grandfather. You have this affinity for St. Lucia that was, you know, ingrained in you from your parents, and your parents are the same generation as mine. You know, that it was the
Mhm.
um, around the same time in the UK, they were having the Windrush generation that came over there, and
Right.
to make a better life. And now we're the first generation Canadians, Americans, UK, European
Yeah.
people. Um, and now that, and then those people, you have a daughter and now a grandson. And do you feel that they're going to have, first of all, do they feel that same tension in terms of their identity? How do they identify, and what's their relationship to the region and to St. Lucia in particular?
Um, I think my daughter is she sees herself. I don't think this generation really thinks of themselves in one way or the other. I think they're very fluid with that. I think my
Mm,
daughter can jump in either case she wants to, just like I did, right? So, and as far as St. Lucia is concerned, I think she sees it as a nice place to visit. I don't know if she has the same kind of feeling that I do towards it. And
mhm.
ideally so, because it's she wasn't born there. She doesn't the her only connection to the island is through her father. So I don't think she's feels the tension or the love to the island that I do. I think that she would love to visit as often as she can. I think she would love to expose my grandson to the island, and I think she loves the culture and everything else. But you know, she's Canadian too. She was born in Canada, so you know, this is her home. The same way
Right.
I feel about Saint Lucia, I suspect that she feels that very same way about Canada.
And I guess that's also a
Yeah,
testament to the very culture in Canada as well.
exactly.
And I think as well, just generally speaking, the younger generation, we're seeing the world. Um, Actually, we're seeing a very interesting tension in the world now. I think there's this tension between the obvious, more globalist, we are all connected mentality.
Right.
You know, this realization, as we have in the saying over at Ansanm, that nous sayons, as we would
Yeah.
say, you're a Creole speaker as well, and we are all interconnected. We're reliant on each other, and I think young people are more aware of that and are more embracing of being
Yeah.
citizens of the earth, right?
Citizen,
Wherever
and if that's what, if there's one thing that the pandemic has taught them, it's how to be a nomad, right? How to
Right.
work from anywhere, and how to be, like you said, a
Yeah.
citizen of the world, right? You
Right.
know, so I think my daughter knows that she has all these options open to her. She's a nurse
Mhm.
right now at CAMH. She knows that she can be a nurse anywhere in the world and be just fine. That's the type
Right.
of liberty and the type of things that we didn't have growing up, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's one of the huge big differences between us.
Right. And at the same time, we're also seeing, though, I mean, there is that general trend, but we're also seeing the nationalist sort of resurgence. And I think even in Canada, Canada went through a very welcoming stage in the post-Diefenbaker Trudeau times when my parents came, and there was a rush of immigration, a celebration of cultural diversity, Caribana being a
Hmm.
huge thing, the Caribbean Festival in Canada drawing millions of people every
Right.
year. Little Jamaica, now
Yeah.
a remnant of itself, by the way, in the St. Clair, Eglinton area, being a stable part of that. But uh, we are starting to see a little bit of a backlash, even in Canada, and certainly in the United States and in Europe, um, of that diversity. And I think perhaps there's some people who are also looking back the other way with some interest.
And I think you can lay that backlash down on one certain president of a country south of us. I think
Right.
he's introduced that kind of mentality to a lot of people, and
Yeah.
the things that they couldn't say prior to
Mhm.
to that administration, they feel that they're at liberty to not just say it, but act it out, right? And enact it in their laws.
Right.
So yeah, so I think that that type of mentality that's being brought up. Yes, some of it is creeping into Canada, but I think by and large, the Canadian populace is very dismissive of that
I
kind
think
of
so.
sentimentality. And
I think so. I think
yeah,
those
and
are
there are a
perhaps,
few
yeah.
people in Canada. Yes, there always will be, right? And we can just call them outliers because that's what they are, and
Yes.
hopefully they stay on the fringe and they don't become mainstream. So
Right.
yeah, exactly, right. So
And I
that's
think we keep it on the fringe by those of you who are privileged,
mhm,
to have positions where you can speak up by speaking up. When somebody
right.
says something that's a little bit too far from that, you tell them it's not cool.
It's
You
not cool.
tell them, nous sayons, we are one, and that pushes it back. But I will say that yes, yes, we can attribute some of that to the current U.S. President, but also some of that to the previous one as well, because I think that we owe the current one to the previous one because we had the first Black president with Obama. I think we probably got some of that backlash as well. Some
Oh,
people saw
absolutely.
change that they couldn't handle.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
good. So
It's all a product of that poisonous tree. And that poisonous starts from slavery. So yeah.
yeah. We have so many of the crew from that we hung with. I'm that Parkdale posse, some of these Caribbean Canadian people of a certain age here in the studio, live studio audience. I'm going to ask for a little bit of a show of hands. You know how to raise your hand in the thing or in the Zoom, or you can put it into the chat. How many of you are Caribbean, were born in the Caribbean, you're in this kind of age range, David and I, and now you wish you could find some way to move back, or you're perfectly happy where you are? Which way? Maybe let's put it in the chat. Say that, I want to go back, or I'm not going back for anything. You can put that in the chat and I'll have a look at what the answers are a little bit later on in the show. But just switching gears a little bit, David, we talked about the Windrush generation, and I think that during that generation, there was this whole move that people, my friend Ian puts
Healthcare.
two words into the chat: health care. Yes.
And he's
Health.
so right.
He is so right. That is definitely something that is rare, but none of us want to lose. Uh,
Right.
this is to all of our American brothers and sisters listening in there. You will generally hear from almost every Canadian that they are really happy that we have our healthcare system. Yes, it might be a little bit slower than we would like, but
Yeah.
it keeps us in the country, for goodness sakes, in many cases, because it's such a blessing. Jerry eventually retiring there. 6 months. Yeah, I think that's an ideal situation, maybe there and back for a lot of
Right.
people wanting to do that. But this Windrush Rush generation, David, they came there, some of them with the idea that they were going to spend some time, make some money, bring it back, retire. They ended up having kids. Now the kids are, kind of cross-border and saying things like that. Ian again echoing the same thing, 6 months in Canada, 6 months in the region. I can imagine which 6 months Ian would like to spend in Barbados.
Right.
It's probably not June. It's probably not these months. The
Mhm.
very nice
Just,
months.
just remember, Ian, it has to be a little less than 6 months because you don't want to lose that residency, bro.
There you
That'll
go.
take away from your
You're
health care.
talking about that healthcare. It's got to be a
Yeah,
little bit less
exactly.
than 6 months.
It
You don't
has
want
to be
to.
a little bit less than 6 months. Yep.
He'll come back for the crop over in Barbados and get back. But the whole thing with this Windrush generation and
Yeah.
between during the 80s to the 2000s, especially, we saw an absolutely massive brain drain from the Caribbean, and it's continued since then. But the migration numbers, the immigration numbers from the Caribbean are way higher than the rest of
Yeah.
the world for highly educated people. This is causing a real problem. So we're talking about 70% across the region, some 75% in places like Haiti and Jamaica, for example, just huge, huge numbers. And so I think, when you look back at the challenges the region is facing today and this kind of massive, what I think is a demographic threat, um, you know, that demographic threat. So how much of that talent left? What goes through your mind as somebody who
Well,
built your entire career abroad? What goes through your mind when you consider the
well,
plight that we're in
yeah.
demographically here in the Caribbean?
The brain drain is real, but I think we have to realize that it's mostly economics driven, right? If you're in the Caribbean and you have attained a certain amount of knowledge, and that you know that you can go abroad and get paid for that knowledge. It's an easy choice for a lot of families to make, right? It's an easy
Sure.
choice for you as an individual to make. Now, I know that the government's trying everything to actually reverse that brain drain by trying to identify early the people who are really academically strong, and giving tuition, free tuition to those people, and saying, you know what, we'll pay for education, but you have to spend 2 years. You have to give 2 years back to the islands. You have to give
Sure.
2 years back to your country. That's a good start, and some of my family members have benefited from that kind of program, and hopefully a lot more islands can sign on to that kind of thing, and maybe that brain drain will reverse a little. But in order to fully realize what the Caribbean is like, I think a lot of that has to fall on our shoulders as expats to try to make the Caribbean a little bit better,
Sure.
and to try to make it viable for our people to say, hey, okay, we can come back and we can still have that same quality of life, and that we have currently in abroad, but better. And I think
Mhm.
you'll find a lot of that reverse happening. I think you'll have a lot of people coming back because it is
And
happening right now, because like I said, that quality of life thing, right? So you'll see a
right.
lot of people saying, hey, you know what, there's a lot here.
Yes. Yeah, there
Right.
certainly is. And I think as well, as we continue to work together, and we'll get a little bit more into what we're doing at Ansanm and the DX Alliance to help reverse a little bit of that, or to provide options
Mhm.
for Caribbean people, whether they want to stay here in the region, or you're somebody who is in the diaspora who wants to be able to contribute, or perhaps somebody who wants to be able to plot a course for a cross-border life. Ansanm is really about that, and the project that we're doing with Caribbean Export. Again, I'll shout out Caribbean Export Development Agency. They're one of our sponsors here, and we're working with them on the Caribbean Digital Transformation Institute project. So you can check that out online. It's really targeting small and medium businesses to make sure that you are more tech ready, more export ready, more ready for business. And doing that by connecting you with digital professionals throughout the region and in the diaspora who can help us get the job done via platforms like Ansanm. You talked about the educational incentives that we're doing here. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about your education. How did you get into tech? Have you always wanted to be in a geek? How
No,
did you get into
no,
it?
no. I fell into it. I didn't really get into it. It's not a choice that I made after I finished high school. I was always a tinkerer. You can ask my mom. I always took things apart and just to see
So
how it
did I.
worked and put it back together. Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I left high school, I went to an institute called the Radio College of Canada just to see if I can get into electronics. Um, it, I found it wasn't really my thing. So the only thing that I was really good at was chemistry. Shout out to Mr. Craig from Applewood Heights High School. He
Nice.
yeah, he taught me to love chemistry, and I was good at it. So I applied to McGill in Montreal, and to my surprise, um, you know, they accepted me. So I went there for chemical engineering.
Okay.
Spent 2 years at McGill, and when in your second year at any university, the one thing that you see throughout the campuses are all these signs for a credit card. So of
Oh,
course, being that teenager, I applied for every single credit card I could
and
get
McGill is
at McGill, and of
where your family is in Mississauga, or
right,
and
exactly.
you're
So
in
I
McGill, which is where?
in Montreal,
So you're out of
600
town.
kilometers away. Yep. So I'm
Oh, so
out of
you're a
town.
free
Yep.
man
Exactly.
out
With
at
credit cards all
school
over
with
the
credit
place, right?
cards. It's a
Yep.
dangerous, sounds good.
It's a
And
dangerous
and Mc- and
combination.
and McGill is quite the party school. If
Oh,
I
yes, it is. Yes, it
Yes,
is.
so I
Absolutely. So
those credit cards probably got to work out at the bar.
oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's strange because they would give you a credit card with $2,000 limit, but next thing you know, you got $6,000 on the credit card, and you're like, how,
How did that happen?
how did that happen? Right.
Oh,
So needless to say, I had to scramble back home with my tail between my legs and living with my mom in the basement. And I one day I just saw a commercial for DeVry University in Toronto,
oh wow,
and
DeVry.
I've always been into computers as well too, because a friend I started with computers from a friend of mine who had an old Commodore 64 that I used to tinker with. So I said, hey, why don't I give DeVry a shot?
Right.
So, I guess my mom was tired of seeing me on her couch and doing nothing, watching Wheel of Fortune, whatever, right? So I I went to DeVry. DeVry was a college in Toronto at the time, so they offered a diploma. They didn't offer a degree, and I really wanted.
I remember some DeVry commercials that were definitely targeting exactly you,
Yeah,
the guy on the
exactly.
couch, right?
Exactly,
That
right.
was
You're
right.
doing nothing with your life. You're a
You're-
bum. Come sign up. Yeah.
And so you did.
Yeah, and so I did, exactly, right. So, like I said, they offered degrees, I mean diplomas at the time in Toronto because it wasn't a full-fledged university. But there was a little there was a little there was a little workaround, and if I finished the 6 months in the US, because DeVry was a full-fledged university in the United States, so if I finished 6 months in the US, then I would actually get a degree, which is what I did.
Okay.
I went to Arizona. I went to Phoenix.
Mhm.
And I finished my 6 months in Phoenix, got my degree, and I got a call from IBM, and I started working for IBM. So
Right out of school.
right out of school. That's how they
Boom.
usually poach you, right? Yeah.
Oh my
You're like,
gosh.
oh,
Did
you're
DeVry call you to do a commercial? Because you would have been just
right.
perfect.
I would have been the
You know,
perfect candidate for that, right? Yeah,
would
for
have been
sure.
perfect.
Yeah.
Right out of
So
school, right into IBM, right into the big corporate
yeah.
machine.
Yeah.
How was that journey in, first of all, what kind of work did you do? And technology is a very broad thing, and you say
It's a very broad
IBM,
thing. There's so
they
many
do so
different
much
parts.
stuff. So
Yeah.
what did you do at IBM? What
At
sort of
IBM,
area?
I was a support analyst for their operating system at the time called OS2 Warp,
Okay.
um, which was a direct competitor to Windows. So IBM had their own, because you have to understand that
How'd that
IBM,
work out? How'd that work
because I know, right? IBM owned DOS, disk operating system at the time, from
System.
which Windows actually grew, right? And
Yes.
IBM actually owned it, and they created their own operating system called OS2. And it didn't do so well because IBM really didn't put any resources into this operating system. They would still sell their laptops with Windows on it, even if they had this OS2 Warp
Right.
operating systems. That was really good because it did the whole multitasking thing and everything before Windows even got there. So for a lot of their big clients, they would market OS2 Warp on computers. But IBM always they were always a mainframe company. They didn't really focus on the client side of things. So
Right.
eventually they sold off OS2, or they shelved OS2, and they just handed everything over to Bill Gates, and then Windows just took off from there. So, while at IBM and supporting this dead operating system, I got a call from, well, one of our clients was the Etobicoke Board of Education at the time. And I just made that transition to work for the Etobicoke Board, which is where I learned all my skills as far as infrastructure management is concerned. And it just went off from there.
Now, at the beginning of the show, I talked about Ansanm being kind of the infrastructure of connection that we're trying to build. And I do mean that more in just a general term, but there's more of a specific meaning in tech with regards to infrastructure. Why don't you explain to the people a little bit what is, infrastructure when in the technology space when you're using that term?
Right. Infrastructure it's just the underlying the underlying structure for IT. So we typically call infrastructure the housing that the IT equipment is located in. The switches and the routers and the internet connection and the power, the cooling systems at the HVAC systems, the server racks, fiber optic cables, all of those things are called that falls under the purview of infrastructure.
Right.
So my job was to manage all those components, manage all those aspects of an IT environment. And like you said before, IT is such a huge space. It's not just infrastructure. It's more like there's security. There's
Yes.
so many different components to it. So
Security and
programming and project
and the
management.
software
Yeah, I mean,
development
yeah,
and the
you can
design stuff, the
yeah,
user
yeah,
experience design.
right,
I mean, that's
right.
you have to have that.
CI/CD. One of the guys that I think are on this call right now, Ian.
Yeah.
He's a program manager, and
Yeah,
he
he's no
that's
slouch.
another, he's no slouch, right? He knows a bit,
a thing or two.
right? So I mean, I think he can attest to what I'm talking about, that how
Yeah.
huge of a space IT is.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. CI/CD, that's continuous integration, continuous deployment. That's
Deployment.
just
You got it.
how
Yeah.
you get the stuff out there onto those
You,
machines. But that
yeah.
infrastructure is kind of the guts where everything lives.
Right.
Everything lives. Everything lives there. And when you started out, I mean, I guess you started out in mainframe sort of days, man.
I did. I
These are
did.
big
Right.
machines in the
In
RBC
the
bank office,
right.
very tied to the place. How
Right.
is infrastructure
Because
evolved?
again, when I was at the Fry, I was learning COBOL and JCL, job control language. Those are all mainframe applications and mainframe programming, right? So that's what you were taught. I mean, we even used punch cards at the time. That's again not to date myself,
You old,
but
you old grandpa.
right. But
Yeah.
yeah. So going from Divine to IBM into the world of mainframes and but again, that I wasn't so much so on that side of the things. I was more on the clients, the more because IBM was more into the mainframe, and when I started with the Etobicoke Board of Education, everything was on-prem, so meaning on premises. All our computer equipment was in a room, and then that was
At
climatically controlled
yeah,
within the Etobicoke Board of Education,
boredom. Yeah. And now
right? So.
we've had this big move now though from
Hmm.
on-prem over, I guess, throughout the 2000s kind of
Hmm.
time and later on. Yeah, and now some of the biggest companies in the world are powered by, or not just powered by, but are making their money from the cloud, right?
Right, the
So like,
cloud.
why not? So there's infrastructure, which was that metal in the Etobicoke
Hmm.
um, office. And then
Hmm.
there's the cloud, which is this, I guess, pun intended, nebulous term. What to explain to us what that move was, and you also, when we were talking earlier, you talked about this backlash. Actually, people were moving to the cloud, and now a whole bunch of people are moving out of the cloud and out of
Right,
these
right.
big companies. Tell me a little bit more
Well,
about
there's
that.
there,
Why
there,
that happened?
there's a reason for the cloud, the existence of the cloud, and why people move to the cloud, and simply economics, right? So every single company that had these special rooms that held all this expensive computer equipment, that paid people to administer that equipment, that paid for the power and the cooling and all those things, and there's a depreciation cost that's a that comes with owning this type of equipment. After a while, companies were like, "Yeah, we don't want to deal with this." So, then the big companies like AWS and Microsoft and IBM and Google, they came up with this whole cloud system where they would have huge data centers all over the world where they're saying, "Okay, you know what? You don't need to have all this equipment in that little room in your office. What we'll do is we'll rent you space in our data center, and can get all the resources that you need to run your applications or services or resources. And it's much more effective for you, and it's much more economically feasible for you to do so, which is what a lot of companies did. Um, but now, due to a whole bunch of different things, we're finding out, hey, that may not be the one size fits all for everybody. Because when you have all your data in these huge data centers that may or may not exist within Canada or a place where the American government can have
Hmm.
access to your data. A lot of Canadian companies are saying, "Hey, we don't need that. We need to have that data sovereignty, right? We need to be in charge of our own data. We want to keep it in Canada and not be accessible by foreign governments or foreign entities." So you find a lot of people are moving back on-prem, and it may not be a full 100% move, but as far as your databases and as far as your data is concerned, a lot of that move is being back on-prem. And Jerry Alexander just put in a great word, hybrid. Yes, a
Right.
lot of companies are moving into that hybrid existence where, part of their services are being held in the cloud, but their data is stored locally.
Right.
And
And I,
and
go ahead.
to give you an example of how this actually works out. If you're a company in Canada and you're housing HIPAA information for people, or you're like your
What's
healthcare
HIPAA? It's
provider.
like the health
Yeah,
health
yeah,
information.
exactly. So you're holding all this private data for people, and you're in the Microsoft cloud. We know that Microsoft has two data centers in Canada, one in Toronto and one in Montreal. But because of the rules that you have and because of the rules that your government has placed on you, you need a third copy of that data, right? So you'd have your resources in Toronto as your primary data center, and then you'd have your resources in Montreal, and it could be in an active situation where you have both data centers functioning at one time, or you could have a failover situation where there's a primary data center in Toronto, and if anything happens, then it'll automatically fail over to Montreal. But you need that third kind
Third.
of backup, right? So Microsoft does not guarantee where that data is going to be placed. It could be placed anywhere in the world on any of their data centers. It could be placed in Ireland, it could be placed in the USA, but in any case, US laws dictate that if the US government wants that data, they can reach into anywhere to get that data, even if
And
that data is in Toronto, because Microsoft is a US corporation. They can actually, and exactly, Ian, because of the Patriot Act, they can actually gain access to that data. And
That's
a
right.
lot of companies, a lot of governments are waking up to that fact, and they're saying, hey, you know what? No, we can't have that. Right?
And
Data.
David, it's not. It's also just when you started to talk about, and I hope it occurred to some people that move from on-prem to the cloud was renting that infrastructure from
Exactly.
so literally building on rented borrowed land, right?
Right.
And therefore being subject to the laws of the land where your physical hardware is resident. And that's quite the vulnerability, as you rightly mentioned, as
Dennis,
Ian
it
mentioned.
goes one step further, not
Go
just
ahead.
where the physical hardware is located, but where the entity is
The
incorporated.
company is
Right,
incorporated.
exactly.
So if you're
That's
getting it from
important.
Microsoft and it's an American
Company, then they have the right for
be
to
right.
everything.
So it's under the Patriot Act. That's
Yeah,
warrantless search and seizure of your data.
right.
Under what was just recently renewed, FISA, which is a Foreign
Hmm.
Intelligence Surveillance Act in the United States as well. That is something, and I think I'll call out for the audience that there. First of all, I'm not just to ride the Americans, because um, I will say that almost every intelligence agency around the world has laws that support their surveillance of people's data. So
Right.
whether it is in the UK or Canada, even there are laws that allow intelligence agencies to access your data. But having said that, the majority of the providers right now, the biggest providers in the world for cloud infrastructure are American companies. So it's
Hmm.
Amazon, right?
Hmm.
Which is interesting. People think about
It's
Amazon out there, and you think you're buying what
no, no,
books and pet food.
no.
But
Amazon
it,
makes way more money in their data centers than they do selling products to people.
isn't that amazing? I just
That
say
is
that again.
absolutely fantastic.
Say that again for the people in the back, David.
Amazon makes way more money in their data centers than they do selling products to
Selling.
people.
Oh my
On
goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And if you were tuning in, I said this last week on the show as well, if you watched the American inauguration and you watched the Tech Bros picture right there, nice and cozy with the US government,
Hmm.
there was the CEO of Amazon and of Microsoft and Google, all of these, some of the largest cloud providers in the
Don't
world.
forget Zuckerberg.
And Mark Zuckerberg, who
Yeah.
who who owns Meta,
Hmm.
formerly Facebook, which also owns the most popular most widely used app in the Caribbean, which is
WhatsApp.
WhatsApp.
Yep.
WhatsApp. Yeah. So, and all of these people, trillions of dollars, all of it digital, all of it in the cloud, all of it subject to warrantless search and seizure. And when you mentioned WhatsApp, something that we discovered a little while ago, and one of the things that will actually kind of bring this conversation a little bit back to Ansanm later on. I do want to have one more thing with you. I want to talk about one more thing about your journey, but was the on WhatsApp, WhatsApp's promises something called end-to-end encryption, right? But one of the things that they don't tell you is that Mark Zuckerberg and his people have a back door to all
Right.
of your metadata, which
Exactly.
means that they actually know exactly who you're messaging, when, and can trace all of that, which is very useful information for surveilling people. And many other foreign intelligence agencies have also discovered back doors to that
Right.
end-to-end encryption. So WhatsApp, Signal, they're not as secure as you may think. There are actually more secure protocols. I mentioned this last week again, but to bear repeating, over at Ansanm, and anybody can sign up for Ansanm at ansanm.org, but we have something that Jovan and David and myself have put together. It's not our creation. It's something called the Matrix Protocol, which is being used by agencies in France and Germany, government agencies, military agencies, intelligence agencies. And we're finding a move away from these predominantly US, definitely foreign controlled cloud-based platforms to sovereign platforms right across the world for very real, very practical reasons right now. Now, I'll also say that if you're listening in and you think, well, what does all this cloud stuff mean to me? Everything that you are hearing right now is coming to you over the cloud. I'm sitting here in Maho. It's making a hop over to a Zoom server, which is probably on an AWS machine somewhere. If you're using things like Chat GPT, you're using the cloud. Facebook, the cloud. You're using WhatsApp, it's the cloud. You go to DBS radio, it's probably some server in the cloud that's sending that data your last mile. So it really does matter, most definitely to you. But Mr. Matherman, before we get into just a little bit, before we start maybe winding up, I want to make one thing I think that kind of ties us back, kind of connects these threads. You didn't stay an employee of IBM. What have you been doing for the last few years? Right? Where are you working now? What have you been doing for the last few years?
Well, while I was at the Etobicoke Board of Education, we onboarded this gentleman by the name of Ken Michael, he was a contractor, and he introduced me to the world of contracting, on deciding, being more in control of my finances. There's a great part to being an independent contract, and then there's a not so great part to it. The great part being that you make more money and you get to go around to every single to various companies when your project's over. The not so great part of it is because, again, you're in control of most of your finances. It's all about what you keep, right? It's all not how much you make, it's how much you keep, and how much you put into things like RSPs and
Sure.
rainy day funds and all those things, right? So that's a bit of the negative part to it. But I've been a contractor since 1995. I currently work for a company, for a couple of companies. One that's near and dear to our heart is Ansanm and the DX Alliance, and another is for a company called CoreConnex. They're a financial services company based out of the US. In 2016, President Obama signed this bill into into existence that allowed people to invest in companies that are not listed
That's
on the
the
stock
Jobs
exchange.
Act, I remember
Right,
that.
the
Yes.
Jobs Act, correct.
Yeah.
So because of this law, people can invest in various companies. So clearly we needed a platform where these companies can register with, and people can do their investments and so on. And so we provide that platform where, hey, you know what? You can register your company. You can do everything on this platform. You can hold your quarterly meetings. And your roll calls and all of those things. And we provide that kind of platform for everybody. We're answerable to the SEC in the United States. So that's what I've been doing, and and the sum and trying to give back to the Caribbean, and trying to give back to a part of the world that's like near and dear to my heart.
That's really well, and we're so glad to have you over at the DX Alliance. And one thing you said, you call it contracting, but another really good word for contracting is entrepreneurship. And in
Yeah,
that sense, you are a solo. You've been a
right.
solopreneur in terms of being a consultant, a contractor, rather than being an employee of a company for many years. You did talk about making some, and it's true, you can make a lot more money on the front
Right.
end because as a solopreneur, you're getting that direct client relationship rather than the employer taking their bit off the top.
Mhm.
Why I wanted to mention that, I think it also comes back to the infrastructure thing and sovereignty in a very strange way, because when you move from being an employee to an entrepreneur, you kind of switch from being the means of production to being the owner of the means of production in terms of your
Right.
own contracts and business and stuff, which are where the value is
Where
generated.
the value
So
really
there,
is generated. Yeah.
right, and that is empowering, and I want to really call that out for many people now. Ian, who's just left, is actually he's been I think he's moved into consulting as well after leaving
Yeah.
some of the big consulting stuff. He's been some
Yeah.
of the big consulting firms and now moving into independent consulting. And there's many of you who are listening to my voice right now, especially those of you in the diaspora, whether you be in Europe, Canada, or the US, who have gone through years in professional life. And you've started to, maybe you're approaching retirement, maybe you've been downsized, like many senior people are these days, by the way, and you're trying to do something for yourself, you're getting into consulting. Well, you can go out there and be a solopreneur, right? What you will find is there's many gaps, and I myself actually made that transition, David, as well. I went from being an employee to, a solopreneur, and then I got hooked up with a few people and learned the power of collecting people, turning that solopreneur thing into really a business. Now, that's not for everybody to do, but what I will say is one of the things that we're doing at the DX Alliance is allowing solopreneurs and consultants or even small teams to work together under a larger collaborative umbrella so that we can compete under for those larger projects so that we